So the story of David and Bathsheba begins this way in 2 Samuel 11. We read this. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab, his main general, and his servants with him and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites, a neighboring enemy, and besieged Rabbah, their capital. But then we read this, but David remained at Jerusalem. He didn't go out to battle. Now, let's pause here and just talk a little bit of background of this story. First, this battle is a continuation of David's conquest against the Ammonites, their neighboring enemy, which began in chapter 10. So we didn't cover chapter 10, but that's what that was about. Second, military campaigns occurred in the spring because it was the end of the rainy season, and so the roads were more favorable for travel. And then thirdly, as I just mentioned, David doesn't go out to battle. Now, many preachers will say that David was neglecting his duty for leading his people into battle, but really this actually wasn't that uncommon in that day and age. It wasn't uncommon for kings to remain behind for their protection, except if it was a major battle. But either way, the point is this: David is in Jerusalem, he's not with his men fighting, he's alone, and sin is crouching at his door. And so we read this in verse 2. It says, it happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. Now, what's going on here? Okay, so David's sitting in his palace, beautiful palace, right? We read back in chapter 7, it's got cedar panels. It's so beautiful that he wanted to build a house like this for the Ark of the Covenant. And he's relaxing, there's a nice cool breeze blowing through the window, and he decides he's going to stretch his legs, and so he wanders out on the roof, the highest place of the palace, and he's going along, walking along, and then he looks down. And what does he see? He sees a naked woman. And the author tells us the woman was very beautiful, which means it's meant to indicate that she caught David's eye. And he lingered there for a while. Now, you probably remember this part of the story, but before we move on, I want to point out that the author right here in this verse doesn't give us a lot of details, which in my mind raised a host of questions this week. For example, has David done this before? Right? If he has, maybe this is a habitual thing he's been doing. Maybe he's been planning his next action. Does he know this woman? Now, we learn later that she's the wife of one of his closest warriors. Maybe she caught his eye at a party. They were both there, and he's been walking on the roof regularly, hoping that she's gonna be on the roof one day. Or conversely, if she's bathing on the rooftop, this close to the palace, does she know that David's walking, and is she intentionally trying to get his attention? Now, how you answer those questions maybe changes the way you read the story. The author leaves the questions unanswered, but if you read the entire narrative, it's very clear that David is in the bullseye. As the king, as the man after God's own heart, he should know better, and he should avoid sinning. Because in this moment, David has a choice, and so do we. Because a scene like this hits home for many people, especially in our modern era. Very few of us, if any, live in a palace. Maybe you do. That's great. Maybe you're taking walks on your roof. I don't know, and looking at the rooftops of your neighbors, which is kind of weird, but, more power to you. But I would say that the internet gives us the walk of the roof through things like social media. Because have you ever been scrolling through Facebook or Instagram and somebody's picture caught your eye, maybe somebody you knew, and you lingered? That's a lingering pause, right? And the longer we linger, the easier it is for intrusive thoughts to come into our mind. In this moment, like David, we have a choice to linger or move on. What would you choose? Maybe in your mind you start to fantasize about what it would be like to be with that person. Right? That's what David's doing here. He's vulnerable. His rooftop is the ancient version of Instagram. These opening two verses, I think, The author wants us to know the power of sin and how quickly it can come into our lives, and he's showing us a really important principle. It's this: sin sinks its teeth into us when we are isolated or elevated. Sin sinks its teeth into us when we are isolated or elevated, or both. That's the tactic of the enemy, friends. If Satan